Yes! I can finally talk about my most anticipated movie of all time. I'm so sorry I was late to the party in this one. I can't believe to say this, but I was beginning to think that I wouldn't get the chance to see Madam Web due to things going on in my life, which really saddened me given the near unanimous praise that this movie has been receiving. Having finally seen the movie, I can report to you that Madam Web is Marvel's masterpiece that we comic book fans have been waiting for decades. This film will certainly influence the cinematic landscape of comic book movies for decades, and will undoubtedly become a decade-defining masterpiece that will inspire countless generations of filmmakers. Now, when it comes to the most influential and important comic book movies, there are a few key ones that I like to think of as milestones. They are 1978, Superman the Movie, 2002, Spider-Man, 2008, The Dark Knight, 2012, The Avengers, 2016, Deadpool, 2018, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, 2018 to 2019, Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, and now 2024, Madam Web. Madam Web is a perfect comic book movie, as in it is a perfect representation of everything wrong with comic book movies, and modern Hollywood really. Let me explain. Hi all, I'm the Grinning Critic and I love talking about movies with a grin. While I may have talked with a fake grin on my face about Madam Web in the opening, but to talk about this movie honestly, I have to talk about the movie with a frown on my face, which really sucks. So let's dive into this. Madam Web is a horribly written superhero. When the movie starts off, she's a paramedic, and as a paramedic, she is an extremely unlikable person. She's rude and treats everyone horribly. But as a superhero, she is really lame. She doesn't even wear a cool costume during the fight scenes. She has this cool power where she can see into the future, but only when it's convenient to the plot. Her character development is unapparent, and you don't care for her at all. This movie also has one of the worst comic book movie team-ups I've ever seen, with her and these three random girls who she doesn't really know, and the way the team is formed is executed in a really poor way. And what a surprise it is that the three girls aren't well-written characters either. The villain in this movie is an extremely disinteresting villain, and his motivations are illogical. The villain has this assistant who's able to have access to security cameras all over the city somehow. We never know how. The villain's clearly taking a lot of inspiration from Spider-Man. He wears this costume that clearly looks like a Spider-Man ripoff. It crawls at walls, except not in a cool way like Spider-Man does. The villain just moves up a wall a little. It's really boring. But I'm so glad that he does crawl up walls, as that brings us to a hilarious scene in the movie, where Madam Web learns that some spider people can crawl up walls, and she thinks, how would I know if I could crawl up a wall? Well, I guess I've never tried. What, she's never tried climbing up a wall ever? And so then she tries climbing up a wall, but falls. This movie has a lot of Spider-Man references, and they're not very clever, subtle references. They're in-your-face, painful, obvious references. There is literally a scene where Madam Web goes to a baby shower, not for any plot advancements, just to tease this Spider-Man Easter egg, and they play a game of guess the baby's name. The baby's name is Peter Parker, but they can't say that name, so the guessing game gets interrupted before the name is revealed. The movie also has many great quotes referencing Spider-Man. There's one that references Uncle Ben's famous "with great power comes great responsibility," but this time it reads, "when you take responsibility, great power will come." Now, one of the reasons that I love watching big blockbuster movies is their spectacle. I love watching movies. I can just sit back and admire the world that I'm being transported to. Even if it's a movie that sucks, such as For the Dark World, often you can get distracted by the effects and by the world you're taking into, because the world you've been taken into looks really interesting, because the movie was made in such a high budget. But I can't really do that for Madam Web. For a movie that costs 80 to 100 million, it looks dreadful. The world in Madam Web looks just like the real world. The movie has no distinct visual style, the colours are bland and boring, there's little vibrance or contrast. Now, from every other technical aspect, this movie is a horrific mess. There is some atrocious ADR that is so obvious, and the editing, whoa, the editing is dreadful. This movie doesn't even really feel like a movie in the way it's edited. Scenes are really oddly cut together, just so a story of some kind is evident. It's so obvious that this movie was frantically reworked in post-production in the last minute, and it's very clear that numerous scenes that would have been needed to give the story some more sense were removed. The script is horribly written, and tension is poorly built. Now, the actors in this movie have also been horribly cast. Although I've never read a Madame Web comic, from what I've seen, Madame Web is an old woman, yet they cast a woman in her 30s to play the superhero. And what were they thinking casting Sydney Sweeney as Spider-Woman and make her be this nerdy schoolgirl? That's odd. That's just odd. Now let's talk about the action in this film. When I saw the Spider-Man rip-off guy fighting, I thought, you know what would be really cool? If he does some cool martial arts stunts. But no, he just does some boring, forgettable fights. But the standout fight in the movie would have to be the final battle, which is one of the worst I've ever seen in a blockbuster movie. It takes place in the best place possible though. It takes place on top of a building titled Pepsi Cola. That tells me two things. One, the filmmakers couldn't get the rights to Coke, so they used Pepsi. And two, this is just some studio contractual agreement, but why would Pepsi want to be connected with this movie anyway? Beats me. In all seriousness, this movie is just a massive misfire, and it's so obvious that this movie was made by a studio that was desperately trying to take advantage of an IP that they had and milk it to extremes. They likely didn't give any creative freedom to the director and interfered with it. The result is an incoherent mess of a film that is undoubtedly one of the worst films of the 2020s decade of the comic book movie genre and potentially of all time. I'm gonna give Madame Web an F. Thanks so much for watching, and I'm the Grinning Critic, and don't forget to subscribe to me. It'll keep me grinning, that's for sure.